What's the best way to learn a language? If you search online, especially on YouTube, you'll find thousands of videos, probably millions of videos talking about this topic. And 90% of them will give you advice that is complete garbage, honestly. They have no idea what they're talking about, or worse, they're lying to you. They're telling you comforting lies. They're telling you what you want to hear, what you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. They are telling you that you can learn the lazy way, effortlessly, watching Netflix videos, watching Dreaming Spanish or some nonsense like that, Duolingo, you name it. All of that is complete garbage, a waste of time. Don't listen to those people. I'm going to tell you what you need to do if you want results in reasonable time. And before someone in the comments starts telling me that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint, and that you need to think long term and enjoy the process, blah, blah, blah. This is what I've got to say to that. A language is a skill. A language is a skill that's valuable. And anything valuable is only valuable because not everyone has it. If everyone had it, it wouldn't be valuable. It's simple economics, right? And like any other skill, the sooner you have that skill, the more valuable it is because you get to enjoy it for longer in your life and you get to benefit from it much longer in your life. Also, the more time you take to learn that specific skill, if instead of 1,000 hours, it takes you 10,000 hours to become fluent in a language, well, you wasted 9,000 hours to get the same result. 9,000 hours that you could have spent uh, doing something else, enjoying your free time, making money, acquiring new skills, doing whatever. Time is valuable, all right? It's not only time, or it's not only all the hours that you spend doing it that you waste if you're using an ineffective method. It's also the fact that you don't get the result, you don't get to enjoy the result for a long period of time. You could have been fluent much sooner and have a lot more professional and personal opportunities that you miss because you are enjoying the process and enjoying the marathon of language learning and all that nonsense. So, how do we learn a language fast and efficiently? Well, let's break a language down. A language is composed of several different skills. It's a skill that's divided in several different skills. Most skills are like that. Yeah, if you are learning to box, you need to learn footwork and combinations and head movement and this and that. A language is the same. You need several different skills. But a language, for the most part, consists of understanding and speaking. Reading and writing is they are useful, but not as useful because for the most part, if you say you're fluent in a language, and if you're really fluent in a language, it means that you can speak it, right? If you can't speak it, okay, you can watch Netflix in the language and understand pretty much everything. But if you can't have a conversation, are you really fluent in the language? Oh, you're not. So you need to learn to understand and speak the language. That's the goal that everyone wants to. Yeah, unless, yeah, there are some people that will say that they want the language to learn literature, to read literature in the target language or something like. There are some people like that. Okay, but that's 1%. For most people, you want to be able to understand and speak. You want to be able to understand spoken language and then have a conversation. Yeah, speak with confidence, with full sentences, complete sentences that are grammatically correct most of the time, and that you pronounce with a decent accent. That's being fluent. So, how do we get there? Well, we need three different things that we need to learn. We need vocabulary, We need to learn a lot of words. You can't understand or speak a language if you don't know a lot of words. You need to learn the right pronunciation so that you understand those words when you hear them and you can pronounce them, you can say them in a way that sounds good. And you need to know grammar so that those words you can form sentences with them that are grammatically correct and that make sense and that don't sound really bad when native speakers listen to you speak. So we need to learn vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar in this particular order. Why? Why is vocabulary the most important thing and grammar the least important thing? Well, simply because if you know all the words in a sentence or in a paragraph or in a video, you can understand. If you don't know any grammar but you know all the words, you will understand pretty well what they are saying, and you'll be able to, even if you sound like a Neanderthal, you'll be able to express what you want to say. If you know all the grammar rules, you've done all the studying, all the different declinations and cases and this and that, but you have basically zero vocab or very little vocab, you won't be able to talk about anything because you simply don't have the words. All right. So vocabulary first, pronunciation next, because even if you know the words, you need to be able to understand them and you need to be able to say them in a way that they will understand you. And grammar last. Why grammar last? And grammar is important because if you want your speech to sound accurate and you want to sound relatively intelligent, at least not like a moron, your sentences should be accurate, right? You should use grammar that's correct, grammatically correct sentences. But that is much easier to learn once you know the vocab and the pronunciation because you can listen to the language all day if you know the vocab, and you'll simply learn the grammar in context, which you can't do with vocab because unless you know 9 words out of 10 and then you learn the 10th one in context, if you know 1 or 2 words out of 10, you will not understand anything. Yeah. So you need to learn vocabulary first. Vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar. All right. How do we do this? By the way, this applies both for comprehension and for speaking. If you know lots and lots of words but no grammar, you can speak. You will not sound educated, but you can speak. If you don't know the vocabulary but you know the grammar, you can't speak. So, how do we learn vocabulary, which is the most important thing? We need, well, there are several ways of doing it. There are several extremely inefficient ways of doing it, and I'm going to tell you which ones they are and why you should avoid them. And then I'm going to tell you what's the best way. So, vocabulary is remembering words, understanding those words when you hear them, and also thinking of them fast enough when you need to use them. And the common thing, the most popular way, has always been repetition. Yeah, you get a list: dog, perro, dog, perro, dog, perro, and you keep repeating it until you learn it. And then you do the next one, and the next one, and the next one, which is extremely inefficient. And in a few days, you will have forgotten most of them. That's how we used to learn English in school. They used to give us long lists of vocab to memorize at home. It's stupid. It's a waste of time, but that's what everyone did back then. That's why most of them don't speak English. Most of the people who had 6, 7, 8 years of classes alongside me, they don't speak English now. I learned another way, so now I can speak English. So that's the first way, and you should avoid that. Just rote repetition, extremely inefficient. The second way to learn vocabulary that's become extremely popular these days is comprehensible input. I've got lots of videos on comprehensible input. Why it's not the silver bullet people make it out to be. It's not. Comprehensible input is decent to learn grammar, and it's decent, pretty good to review the words that you have already learned. But it's not great to learn more vocab simply because A, you need to see those words in context over and over and over again to remember them. And the least frequent words, you will not see them often enough unless you just completely live in the language for years. So you will not learn them. And also, it's extremely slow in general. And it's not an efficient use of time. It's good for reviewing though, especially listening, because it works on your listening comprehension as well, and your spoken pronunciation. But reading, I would avoid it for the most part, unless you're really interested in it. So what's the best way then? Associations, mnemonic associations. Yeah, you take the word. I was repeating dog perro earlier. Perro is in this dog in Spanish. So you think of something that sounds like perro in English, or par, Peru, maybe. Something that sounds like perro. You visualize it, and then you visualize a dog. You need some creativity for this. If you don't have any creativity, you need to practice this skill, the mnemonic associations, until you get good at it. So you visualize the dog, you visualize something that sounds like perro, and you create some sort of interaction between them. The weirder it is, the easier it will be to remember. And then you do it with the next word and the next word and the next word. If you get decent at this, you can do it with over 100 words a day easily. And you will remember most of them, especially if you combine it with all the other exercises that I'm going to talk about, right? So, number one thing that you need is more vocabulary. You will always need to learn more words. And the fastest and most efficient way to do this is using mnemonic associations. So get good at mnemonic associations, all right? This is how I memorize over 100 words a day easily. I'm going to give you a little demonstration. This is Hindi and this is English. This is Hindi written phonetically. This is the original script. This is the same thing, all right? I know this is not 100% accurate when it comes to pronunciation. That's not the goal here. If you're dealing with a language that has very different pronunciation and a different script, you should use a phonetic transcript and learn the words the way you can, the best you can this way. And then while listening a lot, you'll start recognizing them, and eventually you just switch to the proper pronunciation simply by listening to those words in context. All right, so don't worry about that first. It's important to memorize with associations first and then combine with listening, right? So this is how you do it. What we're going to do is find something that sounds like this in English or whatever language you speak. The more languages you speak and the richer your vocabulary is in those languages, obviously, the easier it's going to be for you to find words that sound like these ones. You can also use popular culture, people you know, places you know, things like that, if that's going to be easier, right? Find something that has some sort of emotional connection, something that's memorable for you, and then use that. So let's start. Teen, and I'm going to pronounce this. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but I don't care. The point here is to show how the technique works. And then when I hear three in context, when I'm listening to Hindi, I will eventually adapt my pronunciation and say it the right way. Let's say it's pronounced teen. So what does this remind you of? Teenagers, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. So three, when it comes to numbers, you can either visualize a number or three of this, so three teenagers, or I use sounds for letters as well, and that's content for another video. That's actually a really useful technique that people use to memorize legal code, mm, all the different articles and amendments of a constitution, or lists of things like that. You assign sounds to letters. So for me, three is an M sound. So M is Mao, the Chinese leader, let's call it that. So you can visualize a teen and then Mao and make whatever story you want, for example. Otherwise, you could visualize three teens, but three is an easy number. What about 89? How do you, you're not going to visualize 89 teens, right? That's the problem. So it's good to have uh, an image for every number. I've got images for every number from 0 to 100. And then if it's 10,589, what I'll do is put those two-digit numbers next to each other to make a bigger number. Yeah. So teen, Mao. I can think of an image with Mao and a teen. I'm not going to explain it here. Let's keep this PG 13. Seriousness. Just visualize someone being really, really serious. Maybe someone you know. And then Gambhirta. Gambhirta. And what I can think of, first thing that I can think of is gamba is shrimp, prawn in Spanish. So a prawn that's really serious is something that's. Can you imagine that, a prawn that's been really serious? If you can actually visualize it, you probably remember it. This last part, if you get it wrong the first time or the first couple times with the word, it's not a huge problem as long as you visualize the first part of the word. That's already good enough usually. Him, her, USA, easy. Opposition, opposition party in in the government, whoever's in the opposition party now in your country. And then imagine them going to the VIP section. uh, they go into the VIP section of a club, and they all carrying AK-47s. So now you have Vipach. Oh, that's the last part we have. You could even find something else for that as well. Ash. They turn everything to ash, or they shoot an ashtray with the AK-47, something like that. Political. Siyasi. Silla is chair in Spanish. So a bunch of politicians playing the chess game, for example. If you don't speak Spanish, you have to use a word from your language. It's much harder for me to just use English for this because obviously it really limits my. It's not only that it limits my the vocabulary I've got available. It just I'm used to always doing it using a bunch of other languages. So now if I only have to do it in English, it gets much more difficult. But if you only have English, then you get used to only using English. But again, the more languages you learn, the easier this will get. Thor, Force, the Force, Star Wars. They destroyed Star Wars now. Right? I don't watch it anymore. I, I watched the prequels. The guy turns into Darth Vader, and when I started watching the new ones, the first one was so bad. I was like, no, 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 I'm not watching any of those. But the Force, you still can visualize it, right? Even if you stopped watching, like me. And Thor, I can think of Thorra, which is bitch in Spanish, which has some interesting options for visualization. If not, find something that sounds like this in English. This is a proper name. I think it's that's someone or something's name, so we don't visualize it. Jit is victory. Um, isn't that isn't Jit like a slang or not slang? What's a bad word? Like they use it to refer to Indians these days, right? I think online. So yeah, you can visualize some stereotypical Indians celebrating a huge victory. Jute or jute, whatever it's pronounced, engaged. Jutes were, if I remember correctly, it's not the part of the history of European history that I know the most about, but the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes were the tribes, the Germanic tribes that arrived in Britain during the Dark Ages, the late antiquity, let's call it, not the Dark Ages. So you can visualize some of those, the Jutes arriving in long ships from Denmark or Friesland or wherever they came from, and they get off the ship and they look like Vikings, and then they get engaged. So, and one of them is, imagine the Viking Germanic guy wearing a white dress, like a braid dress and all that. Like, make it stupid and easy to remember, right? Um, move, chal. Uh, Chal, we use it in Basque for throwing up. So movement, throwing up. I can, yeah, easy. Karegi is will do, something with cars and a gi. The gi, jujitsu gi, die, given. You won't always come up with something for all of them. Respect, man, yeah, it drives itself. Really easy. Surf, this sounds like surf. You can do this easily. You see, I don't know how many of them I did. Obviously, I didn't do 300. I started somewhere in the middle. But maybe I did 20 or something. But if you're not talking to a camera and you are just focusing on doing this and doing this on your own, you can do a lot of it. What I recommend you do is set a timer, 5 or 10 minutes, and you do as many of them as you can. Then, of course, you need to review. And for that, I recommend flashcards. Yeah, you get this in the first flashcard and then this one's in the second flashcard. So you have to translate from, so you get outside, and how do I say outside? And then, wow, Bahar, I didn't know that. And then you get it again in a few days. So you review them with flashcards, but first do the association, because instead of reviewing each one 20 times, after reviewing it 3 or 4 times, you remember it really well if you have done the association. Mnemonic associations is the most effective way to memorize a lot of vocabulary fast, which is extremely important if you want to learn a language quickly, because if you don't know the words, you can't understand the language and obviously you can't speak it. So make sure you develop this skill. Practice every day. Take notes on how many memorization associations you're creating every day. Keep track of how many of them you're doing every day. Treat it like the gym. Write down how many words per day, 35 associations, 37, 42, 59, and you keep increasing the number, all right? And eventually you'll be doing over 100. I get messages from people who are doing a couple of hundred, 500 a day, some of them, and it's extremely effective. If you forget most of the words, it's because you're not doing it right. You are not creating the right images, they're not vivid enough, they're not memorable enough. So you need to improve the quality of your associations as well. But eventually you'll end up forgetting most of them if you I mean, I say that, but also I remember a lot of the associations I created a decade ago for some languages I was learning then. And I haven't used those words at all. I haven't seen them. I haven't uh, used them in conversation, and I still remember the associations themselves. So some of them will stay there forever in your hard drive. You'll remember them forever. But for the most part, you need reviewing if you want to remember those words, and also reviewing and context is the best way to not only to review and to remember the words, but also to learn grammar and learn to use the language naturally in general. So mnemonic associations, the more the better, obviously, but you need to combine it with these two exercises. The first one is very, very simple. You just need to listen to the language every day. Put some podcasts on. Don't watch some YouTube nonsense. Put some podcasts on with real native speakers speaking about the topic, content for native speakers by native speakers, all right? Even if you don't understand much in the beginning, memorize vocab and listen to native speaker content from day one. You'll thank me in a few weeks. That's the first thing you need to do. And the other thing is retrieval practice. So we'll take all those words that we're memorizing, we'll create example sentences of all those words, and we will do retrieval practice with them, either with a spreadsheet or flashcards. We'll get a word, the example sentence, and then the translation of the word and the example sentence. And you'll first get the words with the example sentences in the target language, try to remember what they meant, click, you get the results, and then you review them again in a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, depending on how well you know them. And you keep doing this with sentence after sentence every single day, hundreds of sentences a day. All right. And once you get good at recognizing them, understanding them, then you do it the other way around. You get the sentences, the words and the sentences in English or whatever your native language is, and you try to translate into the target language. And then you get the answer. This is going to really help you improve your speaking. Not only remember all that vocabulary, but also learn a lot of grammar because you're learning sentences and make you think in the language, activate vocab. It's great in general. So you need to combine these three exercises for your vocabulary. Memorize with associations, listen to the language a lot, and then retrieval practice with complete sentences, example sentences of those words that you're memorizing. If you combine these three, you do all three every single day, your vocabulary will expand massively. Much, much more than if you just reading books or doing something like that. I get messages from people I read 15 books in this and that language, and now I know 20,000 words. No, you don't. You don't know 20,000 words. Maybe I don't know 20,000 words in English, and I guarantee that I've read more books in English than you have in whatever language you're learning. For you to truly know a word just by reading, you need to have seen it 10, 12, sometimes 20 times in context. And once we start talking about the less frequent words, it will require insane amounts of reading to remember them. Because the next time you see them once and you understand them in context, but then or you look them up, and then the next time you see that word is a year from now, so you will not remember. So you'll be at the exact same position, and then it will happen again in a year because it's a very infrequent word. That's the problem with that. So, yeah, okay, reading is good. Listening is better, obviously. But mostly memorize with vocabulary, memorize vocabulary with associations, combine with listening for reviewing, and retrieval. What's the best way to improve your pronunciation in the language that you learn? Your pronunciation and your listening comprehension. These are skills that are very closely related because even if they are different skills, the ability to produce language and the ability to produce language in a way that sounds as close as possible to native speakers, and the ability to understand the sounds native speakers make. Um, they're different skills, but they both come from the same knowledge, right? You need to know what different words and letter combinations are supposed to sound like in the language that you're learning. So you need to learn that first. So it's a good idea to take a look at basic pronunciation rules. But once you've done that, you need to practice. And I'm going to give you the best exercises for this to work both on your listening comprehension and your own pronunciation at the same time. The first thing you need to start doing from day one is listening to native speaker content, podcast, radio, whatever. Find a topic that is interesting for you, native speaker content by native speakers for native speakers, and listen to it daily while you go for a run, like I do, while you do things in the house, cooking, cleaning, whatever. You commute, you drive, you work out, whatever you do, just listen to it daily, even if you don't understand anything at first. If you memorize vocabulary daily, how much you can understand will, the amount of words you can understand from what you listening to will drastically improve, grow in a few weeks. Right. So if you memorize vocab and listen every single day, your comprehension will improve fast. But this is just one of the exercises you need to do. Listening a lot is extremely important because obviously you can't mimic sounds that you've never heard. You can't produce language convincingly if you've never heard or rarely hear what that language is supposed to sound like. So you need to listen to the language as much as possible all the time. That's number one. But after that, you need to do deliberate practice. It's not just enough. It's not enough to just have some exposure to the language and eventually you'll understand everything and you speak like a native and that's it. No, that that is not going to work. You need to work on your skills specifically with deliberate practice. So let's talk about that. The first thing you need to do is listening and repeating. Find sentences with text and audio and listen and repeat. You listen to the sentence and you repeat, trying to sound as close as possible to whatever you just heard. And do the same sentence several times. Pay close attention to every single detail, small details, not only the combination of letters, the sounds they make, and the sounds that are different from your language, maybe don't exist in your language, but also the rhythm, the tone, the natural rhythm of the language. Imitate that as well. You should mimic that as well. And, and this is important, and I know a lot of people are not going to like this, you should often, or at least regularly, record yourself doing this and then listen to yourself. Maybe even send it to a native speaker. Because it's one thing to listen and repeat, that will help. But if you are listening to yourself, you listen to the native speaker sentence and then yourself repeating the sentence, you will notice all the differences. Sometimes you won't notice everything. Sometimes you will not notice things and then you show it to a native speaker and they will notice the differences. But for the most part, unless you're already at a high level where it's harder to tell what exactly makes you sound non-native, if you're a beginner, doing this regularly will help you see where you're making the mistakes, where you sound very different from a native speaker and why, and you polish all of those differences in pronunciation. Nobody likes doing this. I don't like doing this. I got used to it, but I don't like doing this. but that's how you improve. Feedback is extremely important. Um, the last thing that you can also do, although it's not as important as the listening and repeating, is shadowing. Shadowing is similar to listening and repeating, but you repeat it simultaneously. You don't pause it, you simply repeat after whatever you listening to, podcast, radio, some show you're watching. There'll be a little delay, half a second, 1 second. Hear a sentence, you repeat the sentence. Obviously, you can't say it simultaneously because it's not a song. You don't know what they're going to say. But once you understand the sentence, you repeat it as soon as possible, trying to sound as close as possible on everything: pronunciation, tone, intonation, rhythm, everything. I think a lot of those, so they just said they're all basically the same thing, but whatever. You try to mimic the native speaker. You keep doing this for the duration of the video, the audio file, or until you get tired of it. This helps. This will help you sound much more natural in the language. But don't rely only on this. Do the listening and repeating one with the recordings because that's where you really notice. You pay attention, you get the feedback, you notice where you're making the mistakes. So combine all these three. This will help you with your own comprehension, obviously. The listening and repeating will also help with comprehension because even if you know the words, sometimes when you hear native speaker audio and they're speaking fast and using connected speech, all words kind of blend into one long word and they're very difficult to distinguish. But if you are doing deliberate practice, paying attention to the sounds and every single word, you'll get much better at distinguishing those words when you hear them. Yeah. So it will help you speaking pronunciation, obviously, but also your comprehension. So do all these things: listening, shadowing, and listen and repeating with feedback. If you want to improve your listening comprehension and your own pronunciation when you speak, this is what deliberate practice looks like. You shouldn't only do this, combine it with listening as well. Just listen to podcasts all day, but you need deliberate practice as well. This is what you should do.
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause les effets indésirables?
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause des effets indésirables?
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause les effets indésirables?
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause des effets indésirables?
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause les effets indésirables?
Quel est le nom du médicament qui cause des effets indésirables? Next one.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus. And you do this with sentence after sentence. 50 a day, 100 a day, as many as it takes. And you repeat the same one 3, 4, 5 times, sometimes even more. These are long sentences, they're difficult. Obviously, I'm not a beginner in French. It's a difficult, you'll struggle, it's not fun, but it works. And it works especially well if you record your session and then you listen to yourself repeat the sentences and you notice where you're making the mistakes, right? You will notice where you sound different from the original, and the next day you'll do it a little bit better, and the next day you do it even better, and so on. As long as you continue getting feedback, you could always send it to a native speaker as well for feedback, but simply by listening to yourself repeat the sentences, you can compare yourself to the original and see most of the differences. I know you don't like doing this, I don't like doing this, but it works. This helps with obviously pronunciation, but also helps with connected speech, fluency, because you sound faster, you learn not only the pronunciation of specific sounds, but also how the language is supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to sound like when you use longer sentences, where the stresses are, where the how the words all connect together, all of that. You learn it by doing this. It's difficult, it's not fun, but it's effective.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus.
Je suis désolé, nous ne pouvons pas rembourser les billets vendus. Vendus.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes.
La peur de l'homme fait que les animaux du monde entier deviennent nocturnes. And so on and so forth. These are not exactly sentences you'll need for conversation. Yeah, les premiers embryons de rhinocéros en éprouvette ont été produits.
Les premiers embryons de rhinocéros en éprouvette ont été produits.
Les premiers embryons de rhinocéros en éprouvette ont été produits. I'll never say that in a conversation. Actually, I'm gonna use it with some some guy I train with in the gym, but not super useful. But it's good for not useful sentences, but good for pronunciation. If you want useful sentences, you use language islands. This is good for pronunciation. So record yourself doing this. Do it over and over again. Record yourself doing it. Listen to the recording, and then try again. Language islands are the fastest and most efficient way to become conversational in any language. Let's take a look at them. Basically, what you need to do is first of all write a list of everything you want to do in the language, places you want to go, the conversations you want to have, everything you'll have to talk about, all the topics, the interactions you'll have or that you might have. The more prepared you are, the better. Write a long list of interactions, situations, and conversations. And then for each one of them, this is AI generated, but you can write your own sentences, which is quite time consuming, but you can combine both AI and your own creativity. That's actually the best idea because there might be things that you didn't think of, but AI came up with. So you should first tell AI to write a long list and then add your own stuff and adapt the sentences you get there. And you get sentences about that specific conversation topic or for that specific situation, street vendors in this case. Let's say you are going to Latin America and you want to be able to bargain and haggle and talk to people, this and that. And this is how you learn to do that. You get these sentences in English, you should adapt them and add your own, and then you translate it and you learn this. And you do the same thing for taxis, for restaurants, for bars, for meeting people, etc. You can also do it about yourself, talking about yourself, your work, your hobbies, each one of your hobbies in detail. You everything you normally talk about. You could keep track of the things you talk about in your daily life, and then you prepare language islands for all of those things. That way, you work specifically on the things that you are likely to use instead of just random language. This is the 80-20 rule used correctly in language learning. So, how do we learn this in the end? Once we've got it written like this, how do we actually learn it? That's the great question. Well, first of all, you need to associate the vocabulary. Use memorization with associations to learn all the vocab. All the words that you don't already know, create mnemonic associations for them. And after that, you should download this as a CSV file, create flashcards with it, and review them daily aloud. so that you get the sentences in English first. You think of it, try to say it aloud in Spanish. So negotiating prices and souvenirs for souvenirs or goods. Negociando precios para souvenirs y bienes. Yeah, it sounds weird in Spanish, but anyway. Hello, how much is this? Hola, ¿cuánto cuesta esto? Hola, ¿cuánto cuesta esto? Correct. So you read it, you say it aloud in Spanish, and you get the feedback with the flashcards. This is difficult, but it forces you to think in the language. You develop a muscle memory by saying things aloud in the language all the time, and you get an immediate feedback so that you are constantly getting corrected and you're learning from your mistakes. This is great to learn vocab, to learn grammar, and to increase your active vocabulary, not only the words that you recognize, but also you learn to use them. And it's a great exercise in general. And if you do it with your own sentences, you'll get really good at speaking very quickly. And the other thing you can do with this, if you want to make this exercise even better, even more complete, is turn this into an audio file with text to speech software and binge listen to it. Create a playlist with all the different sentence lists for all the conversations, the interactions, and the situations that you want to have or that you think you will have, and listen to it over and over again, and then learn the same sentences with retrieval practice. And this way, you can learn hundreds of useful sentences super fast, improving your comprehension and your speaking a lot very, very quickly. Retrieval practice is the most effective way to learn a lot of information fast. This is not my opinion, this is a fact. This is a scientific fact. If you ask any neuroscientist, if you ask all those neuroscience gurus online, Andrew Huberman, etc., they'll always mention retrieval practice. What is retrieval practice? Trying to retrieve the information, which means that it's difficult, that you'll struggle, but that you will learn quickly because you'll get immediate feedback and you learn from the feedback. So you try to remember what it was and you then get the answer and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. This is much more efficient than simply reviewing something over and over again. Yeah. If you just review something over and over again, okay, you'll improve, but very slowly. If you do this, it's going to be much, much harder to implement. It's difficult, you'll struggle, but you'll learn way more. You're much more likely to remember it. In fact, you'll 100% remember it if you do it regularly. So, this is how it works. You get sentences, and you have to retrieve the information and you have to try to answer, translate this into the target language. So we have to achieve our goals. In this case, it would be, wir müssen unsere Ziele erreichen. Richtig, that's correct. Wir müssen unsere Ziele erreichen. So, shows up again in 5 days. They want to win the game. Sie wollen das Spiel gewinnen. Correct. Sie mussten sich scheiden lassen. They had to get a divorce. Correct. Die Wolken schickten sich am Himmel. This is easier, by the way. The clouds gathered in the sky. Target language into your own language is way easier. The best way to do it is mixing both. So you're working on your comprehension by doing this, because you get the sentence and you try to understand it and then see if you understood it or not. The other way around, okay, this is also what was bedeutet this word? Easy. This way, into the target language is much more difficult. Wer will uns in der Konferenz vertreten? Wer wird uns bei der Konferenz vertreten? This is great for grammar because if you make mistakes, I said in der Konferenz, it's bei der Konferenz. You learn, if you pay attention, obviously, to the feedback, you learn the grammar, you learn the vocabulary. If you didn't know the vocab, now you know. So you see it again in 10 minutes, and this time I'll get it right. Sie besitzt ein großes Haus. She owns a big house. You see. Er sitzt im Sessel. Keine Ahnung. I don't know what Sessel is. Ah, okay. Sessel. So now I have to create a mental image for this. Armchair, Sessel. Okay. Hard. Ich beziehe mich auf dein Angebot. I'm referring to your offer. Yeah, I refer to your offer. He does good work. Leistet gute Arbeit. Die Polizei wird den Fall untersuchen. Ermitteln. Okay. Die Pflanze hat sich verschrimpt. Verschilft. Verschimpft? Yeah. Almost, but no. Some mistake there. So again, and you keep doing this with hundreds of sentences every day, aloud. And then you repeat it aloud if you made a mistake. The actor will appear on stage. Der Schauspieler wird auf die Bühne beitreten. Auftreten. Der Schauspieler wird auf der Bühne auftreten. Es ist beitreten. So, try again. Wir betreten das Bild. Frieden ist wichtig. Der Frieden ist wichtig. How should we treat this problem? Wie sollten wir dieses Problem behandeln? Yeah, this is great, especially it's great at any level, especially at advanced levels, to get rid of every single small mistake you might be making. You keep doing this exercise over and over again, and you constantly troubleshooting your language skills, your language production skills. This will really improve your speaking if you keep doing this and you pay attention to the feedback. Yeah. Speak aloud, get feedback, try again, make another mistake, more feedback. Schirmt seine Familie. Schützt. Schirmt? I think that's Dutch. Schützt, yeah, obviously I should know that. Ich habe eine Einladung bekommen. Der Meeting wurde bis nächste Woche verschoben. Auf nächste Woche verschoben. Das Meeting wurde auf nächste Woche. Der, die, das, those mistakes. By doing this, you slowly find them and fix them. And this is it. This is retrieval practice. You do this daily first with single words that you've been memorizing, and then with sentences. And you do this with your language island sentences. You do this with grammar sentences to learn all the grammar. This is how you learn all the grammar without having to study the rules. Simply translate into the language over and over with feedback. And you do it with all the words you want to learn, also in example sentences, and you translate into the language until you get them all right. You can do this with hundreds of words a day, hundreds of sentences a day, and in a few weeks, you'll notice you'll be able to say a lot in the language with much fewer mistakes. The number one thing why people fail at language learning is consistency or lack thereof. If you're not consistent and if you don't learn regularly, it doesn't matter how good the system you're using is, you will not improve at anything. This applies to language learning, applies to any kind of hobby, sports, any profession. If you don't learn consistently, if you don't practice consistently, you will not improve that much. That's a fact. The second thing, though, is the quality of that practice. You need deliberate practice with feedback so you get better every single day. Every session should have goals, and every session you should be trying to get better at one specific thing, one specific aspect of your language, that language that you're learning in this case, or whatever else you're learning, a sport or a skill. You should be focused on learning at least, improving at least one aspect of it, maybe more than one. But you should end every learning session knowing that you are better than when you started learning that day, previous, before, an hour earlier or 2 hours earlier, or whenever you started that session. By the end of it, you should know more and be better at it. So you need specific targeted exercises, deliberate practice, and and to be super consistent. If you are really consistent, like some people are, again, there are two types of people who fail miserably at language learning. People who are not consistent at all, and they're always searching Reddit and YouTube videos and the next Steve Kaufman video. The answer will be here. Like finally, I know how to learn a language. And if you look at what they've been doing for the last 5 years, they've spent 200 hours a year watching language learning videos and 20 hours actually learning the language. That's those are the people who are always looking for the one thing that will fix everything. But instead, they should be practicing. That's the first type of people who will always fail unless they change their ways. And the second, and that probably includes a lot of you who are looking for the solution and ended up in my channel. Apply my concepts consistently, and you'll notice a difference. But you have to be consistent. Don't come crying to me telling that it doesn't work if you've tried it once and then stopped and tried again 2 months later. All right, do it consistently. The second type of people, and this is quite sad, people who are actually consistent but doing all the wrong things. If you are on a 1,000-day Duolingo streak, if anything, you are consistent. You are consistently doing something stupid that's not getting you any results. You're doing it because I guess it's easy to stay consistent when it's something that's basically a video game, right? It's a video game that you're playing and you're pretending to do something productive. It's the same thing for Dreaming Spanish and that kind of YouTube channels where you're just watching dumb videos and you're pretending to learn and you're pretending to be productive. Again, it's better than absolutely nothing. But if you have some semblance of self respect, some ambition, your time is valuable, your time is worth something, that's not acceptable. Even if you are really consistent and you do it every single day, you'll spend years doing it and you won't get any results. Or you get your results will be quite bad in any case, mediocre at best. So that's the second type of people who fail. Well, at least they reach mediocrity at most. You don't want to be in either of those groups. You want to A, be consistent, yeah, do the exercises, whatever exercises, but do effective stuff, but do it every day. And B, do the effective stuff. You need both. You need an effective plan, and then you need to implement it consistently. I know this is harder because something that is very time efficient, like retrieval practice, is difficult, and people struggle with it, and it's not fun to do. So people quit, people procrastinate. Avoid that. Just get on with it and do it every single day. And then in 30 days, 60 days, you'll be thanking me because you will speak the language. In 30 days, you'll speak it decently, I think, conversational. And in 60, 90 maybe, if you've been super consistent, you'll be pretty much fluent if you do it the right way. Super consistent, and doing the hard stuff. I know it's I know it's a lot to ask. I know most of you won't do it, but the people who really want to get results will do this because it's the only way to do it. There's no other secret. If you want to achieve extraordinary results at anything, you need to put in the effort. Yeah, day in and day out, and doing the hard work, not just doing what's fun and easy, but doing the hard work. Comprehensible input. Everyone's talking about this. Every time I go on YouTube, I find more videos that are being recommended to me for some reason of random people. The amazing way I discovered to learn languages, and it's always the same thing. Them with their mouth open, face, and then it's a talk on comprehensible input and how it's the best thing since sliced bread. And the reality of it is, for some reason, it just became popular. And I think I know what that reason is, but let me know in the comments. Why do you think it's so popular? And if you think it's all that effective? I know it's not. In a way, it'd be unfair to say that's completely useless. Obviously not. But the thing with comprehensible input is that they have turned it into something that it's really not. Comprehensible input is a good way to keep slowly improving the language that you have already learned, to review the vocabulary that you've already learned, and to learn grammar in context as well. It's not a good way to learn a lot of vocabulary fast. And vocabulary is the most important thing in language learning. Whenever I say comprehensible input is not an effective and efficient way to learn a language, there'll be a bunch of people in the comments telling me that I didn't do it the right way, that in order for comprehensible input to work, it needs to be comprehensible. So you need to already know the words that you are getting your input with, which it kind of defeats the purpose because how are you learning words with a learning method that requires you to already know the words? You know what I mean? So it's good to review. It's not great to learn new content, new words mostly. It's good for grammar. Grammar, you learn it in context. Words, you learn them in context if you see them a lot and you already know a lot of the other words. If you know 8 or 9 words out of 10, the last word, if it keeps showing up, and that's a big one, if it keeps showing up and you keep seeing it in context over and over again, you'll just understand that word in context and eventually you remember it. But the problem is that for the most part, after the most common words, those words that you see all the time and that easy to remember, most less frequent words or non-frequent words actually, they're non-frequent. It's in it's in the name. So for you to learn them in context, you need insane amounts of input, which means that it's not an efficient way to learn because you could learn those words much faster by memorizing them. That's the problem with comprehensible input. Again, I've got nothing against reading. Reading is great. I read a lot. I've read a lot of books, but it's simply not the most effective and efficient, time efficient way to learn languages. Also, um, listening, which is much better than reading because you're working on your listening comprehension and your pronunciation while you're not doing any of that by reading. Listening is way better and it's great and you should do it, but by itself is not going to be enough. You need to combine it with everything else, right? So comprehensible input is good, do it, especially listening. And if you really like reading, then read as well. But it should always be combined with memorization of vocabulary and retrieval practice, right? And other speaking exercises. That's my opinion on comprehensible input. And I said earlier that for some reason, it's become really popular. I think I know why it's become really popular, because it offers you an effortless, lazy way to learn a language. That's the attractive part. That's why so many people like it. They like the idea of acquiring a valuable skill with no effort. People are lazy, people are dumb. That's why comprehensible input is so popular, because they want to get something in exchange for nothing. And the reality of it is, nothing that's valuable in this life, nothing that's valuable is easy. So if you want to get really good at speaking a language, you can't do it just with comprehensible input. If you just read and watch videos and listen to the language over and over again casually, just enjoying content, good for you. You'll be able to watch shows on Netflix and eventually understand them, and eventually speak some broken language at some point as well. Will you be able to speak the language you're learning the way I'm speaking English now, just with comprehensible input? Hell no. You need deliberate practice. Speaking is a skill, and you need to work on the skill with deliberate practice and feedback. All right. So it's good that you do it. It's much better than doing nothing or than doing Duolingo or something like that. But it's not going to be enough. All right. So stop being lazy. Stop looking for cheat codes and the effortlessly learning the lazy way and all that nonsense. Start doing the hard work, learning deliberately with deliberate practice. If you look at anyone who achieved anything meaningful, important, anyone who's successful, anyone who is at the top of the game in any field, in sports, in business, any kind of whatever, the best scientists, the best athletes, the best, you name it. There's a lot of deliberate practice behind that, right? So stop being lazy and start working hard and achieving things.